Everybody. So we will continue with Shantideva, who is not letting up on us about the power of our attachment. And he's going to continue to lay it on. But the section on equalizing self and others, we can see the end of the tunnel where we will find that. Okay, but we first have to do something with all of our attachment, Otherwise, how are we going to equalize self and others, which is already quite difficult to do. Okay, but it's one of my favorite teachings, the equalization of self and others. Okay, so let's imagine in the space in front, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are our role models, who have studied and contemplated and meditated on the teachings themselves, put them into practice in their daily lives, and then with so much kindness continued the lineage of the teachings so that we can contact them today. So let's generate our motivation. And recall the precious opportunity that we have to encounter the Dharma and how much we must have done in many previous lives to create the causes to have the present opportunity. And especially as monastics and monastic wannabes, then having a virtuous aspiration to really dedicate our lives to the Dharma it's hard to come by. And it's difficult to maintain because our ignorance, anger, and attachment are constantly interfering with our innermost wishes and aspirations and motivations. So as Shantideva recommends in chapter 7, we put on the armor of joyous effort and go forward in our practice with a lot of happiness and enthusiasm. And then share that happiness and enthusiasm and whatever we have learned through our practice with other living beings, motivated by the aspiration for ourselves and all others to attain the state of a fully awakened Buddha. So generate that motivation now. So there was one news article yesterday, today. I didn't read the article, I just read the headline. But some scientist wants to count the number of ants in the world. So I don't think he's going to count them one by one, but at least make an estimate. And the title of the article just said, you're going to have to find a lot more zeros. Okay, so that means there's going to be 10 to the whatever number of ants in the world. And we have a lot of them here, okay? You know, all over our property. You know, lands, I haven't seen any, and yeah, I think they sold their property and went on to buy some new, to get some new property. Oh, the turkeys. Okay. Yeah, because we used to have 2 big anthills right outside here. But I'm confident that they took care of themselves and relocated. But, you know, to think, here we are, and how many ants on the property and how many human beings? And if we were to consider all the land in the world, a lot of which is uninhabited by human beings, and how many ants are there? You know, and then you see that the number of human beings is actually quite small. And among that, not all human beings have a precious human life. Yeah, there's many other conditions that we have to have the opportunity to encounter the Dharma and study it and practice it without interferences. So somehow, when we think about it, it almost seems miraculous, you know, that how did we come across that opportunity? And when I think of myself and how I grew up, you know, kind of, there weren't any Buddhists around where I grew up. Yeah. The culture was not a Buddhist culture. You know, the values of the community were not Buddhist. So it seems even more miraculous that somebody like me encountered the Dharma. You know, I mean, if you're born as a Tibetan, for example, it's not. Yeah, you're going to encounter the Dharma when you're a kid, and that's just the way it is. But us, yeah, growing up in this country, it's like, how in the world did that happen? So when we really think about it, we see the preciousness of our opportunity and what we can do with it, and then we don't want to waste it. So what Shantideva is doing in this section is targeting how we waste our lives. Yeah? And he's especially targeting attachment, because that's one of the biggest ways we waste our lives, isn't it? Looking for beautiful things and glitter and so on and so forth, the 8 worldly concerns. So, yeah. And the thing is that, we have to really work hard on diminishing the 8 worldly concerns, because the presence or absence of the 8 worldly concerns is the demarcation between an action being a dharma action and being a worldly action. Yeah. So it's not just sufficient to look like we're practicing dharma, but to have a worldly mind, because the worldly motivation will contaminate whatever we do. Yeah. So it's very important, to really be able to identify the 8 worldly concerns in our experience. And then with understanding, that's very important, with understanding their disadvantages, then to leave the 8 worldly concerns aside. Okay, I emphasize the with understanding, because if we don't have deep understanding in our own hearts about the disadvantages of the 8 worldly concerns, then we're just going to wind up pushing ourselves with a lot of shoulds and ought tos and supposed tos. And that, that doesn't produce the kind of, it may get us going in the right direction to start with, but it doesn't bring about a stable change in our mind. Yeah, because how much can you should yourself? To what degree can we just say, I shouldn't be attached, I shouldn't be attached. Oh, I want this extra piece of whatever it is, and I deserve it. Oh, I shouldn't have it. Oh, good. I restrained myself. I didn't take the extra brownie. But, oh, I want that. I'm dreaming about brownies, so I'm offering tons of brownies to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and may that ripen in my receiving tons of brownies in the future. Okay? No. And we all know, because we've all done it, I think, what happens when we squeeze ourselves. Okay. We just bottle everything up, and then at one point we just go, okay. So that's where the understanding comes in. And that's why these verses in Shantideva are so important, because he is really hitting at the disadvantages of attachment. And when we understand those, and especially not just understanding them here, okay, it's easy to know the words, but when we can look at our own lives and see what happens when we follow attachment, that's when the understanding comes. And that's what makes it much easier to leave things aside. Yeah. So it's not that we are expected all at once to, release all of our objects of attachment, but to really focus on generating the understanding of the disadvantages of attachment, and how attachment and self-centeredness are our enemies, not our friends. And then, it becomes easier. Okay. It's like if somebody offers you, some delicious food, but it's laced with poison, then the understanding that it's going to make you sick overpowers the attachment to the delicious food. So the same here, if we know that following attachment is going to bring us suffering in this life and future lives, then it makes it easier. It's like, well, who wants to get involved with attachment then if it's only going to bring this kind of result. Okay? But like I said, it's a slow process, and it has to be done with understanding. Yeah. There are times, one of the reasons we take precepts is because when our understanding is not so deep, the precepts at least protect us from doing the actions. Okay. If you have a precept of celibacy, your mind may still be interested in who knows what, but you refrain from the action. And in the meantime, you learn about the disadvantages of sexual attachment, which is, what he's spending a good chunk of this chapter on. And then with that understanding, it becomes much easier to keep the precept. And so the same with, so many of the other precepts that deal with our, our greed and our wish to get more and better and more and better and more and better. Whether it's sense objects or we want praise, we want approval, we want a good reputation. All of that is included in sense objects. So don't just think sense objects mean, a pretty thermos. It's, because how do you have a good reputation? It comes because you hear things about yourself and you read things about yourself. How do you, get the praise? Again, hearing. Approval, hearing, seeing people's faces. So these things it comes back to our senses, which is why, when we were doing Tisha's text on Monday, the Joel Garland, he was so emphatic about guard your senses. Yeah, because if your senses we don't do that, we're like all over the place, then we start hinting, we start flattering, we give a small gift to get a big gift, and then we devolve into what is wrong livelihood. When the Buddha talked about wrong livelihood. Okay. So, So we have to really think about these teachings and see their truth. Okay, so again, to remind people, this is not, beginning teachings for people just coming into the Dharma. Yeah, and when he's talking about everything here about, because he's still talking about sexual attachment, everything you have to do to fulfill your sexual desires, he's not saying sex is bad. He's not saying it's sinful. He's not saying the body is evil. He is just saying, look at your own experience and see what unfolds from it. Okay. So we'll start with verse 73 today. So some malicious and lustful people wear themselves out by working all day, and when they return home in the evening, their exhausted bodies lie prostrate like corpses. So they worked hard all day to get the money, to have a spouse, to support a family. But when they get home, they're wiped out from working. And they can't really enjoy, it's like, honey, I'm too tired, and yet they went through all that rigmarole to have that. So it's very interesting to relate different subjects and see how, once there's the desire, once there's sexual desire, then you get into, getting married and having children. And when you have a spouse and children, then you need money to support them. So then you have to work. And the your spouse and your children want, they want sense things. They want especially nowadays when you have kids, they all want what all the other kids have. So as a good parent, you want to give them, first of all, what you didn't have when you were growing up. And second of all, you want to give them what all their friends have. So you have to earn more money to be able to afford all of that, which means you work longer hours or you travel more, okay? And then it also means you have to have a certain kind of car. You have to live in a certain kind of neighborhood, yeah, with a certain kind of house, with certain kind of possessions, yeah, because you are moving in a certain class of Americans and with your kids and their friends in a certain class being able to afford certain things, and you don't want your kids coming home crying, oh, Johnny across the street has the latest, digital hooga gaga, and your mommy and daddy won't get that for me. You don't want to hear that as a parent. So, you see how one thing leads to the other. And then pretty soon your whole life is captivated by that. Yeah. And then you have to, you want to get a good paying job where you can get raises. Yeah. And so, all the competition that goes on in the workplace and so on and so forth. Yeah. And it all started with sexual desire. It's very interesting when you trace this whole thing. Yeah. Okay. Then 74. Some have the suffering of being disturbed with travel and having to go a long way from home. Although they long for their spouses, they do not see them for years at a time. Okay, so travel in ancient times, if you were going to be a trader, boy, you were gone really for years. It took a long time. Now, still, people travel a lot for business, and you're away, maybe not for years at a time, but sometimes for months at a time if you work for an international corporation, and you have to go to somewhere else where they're starting some new project. And then other people just travel, in your own city to somewhere else in the country. And then you're on the plane, whoop-dee-doo. Who likes to sit on planes for a long time? Yeah. And, you're separated from your loved ones. And when you get back, you're exhausted after your traveling trip. Okay. So although they long for their spouses, they do not see them for years at a time. And I think of people like who enlist in the army. And there's a verse later on about becoming a soldier, but I think of them and, they'll get deployed for months and years at a time. And you're always reading stories of people, with the guys, their wives are pregnant and they're off fighting some war and their wife is giving birth. And, she wants him there, and he wants to be there, but he's off, either getting killed or killing others as a way, as a career to start a family. Yeah. And there's one image that has really stuck in my mind about this. And like I say, there's another verse coming about it, but I'll give you the story now. You may remember there was they were doing some kind of operation in Africa a few years ago. And a few of American soldiers got killed in it. Yeah. And Trump spoke to the wife of one of them on the phone, and she was not very happy about it. But the image, because she went to the airport, because they're bringing the body of her husband home, and there's his casket, draped in an American flag, and I think they had one child, perhaps two already. You're remembering this story. And there's a picture of her kneeling at her husband's casket, and her whole life is changed. Whole life completely changed now because her husband was killed. And she's pregnant with this child too. And so she's going to have this baby. He's already dead. She's going to raise her child plus the new baby by herself. And, the army may give her a little bit of money, but she's going to be on her own. And her whole life is changed by this. So I just, I remember seeing that picture and thinking, wow, people don't think about this when they enlist in the Army or Marines or wherever it is. Okay. So here it says, although they long for their spouses, they do not see them for years at a time. But also they can get killed in the process and never see their spouses again. 75, for some who wish for benefit due to confusion, they even sell themselves for the sake of sexual partners and the like. But not attaining what they wish, they are aimlessly driven by the winds of others' actions. Okay, so they sell themselves. Yeah. So it did happen, in Europe and in Asia, that people would sell themselves. And what's the whole thing about indentured servants? At the founding of this country, people who sold themselves as indentured servants crossed over to America, worked for almost nothing in grueling situations, and in order to get a little bit of money, and yet, they're an ocean away from their spouses. Okay, but not attaining what they wish. They are aimlessly driven by the winds of others' actions. When you sell yourself, and here, he's talking literally, you sell yourself, then your life is no longer your own. And so sell yourself, involves, it sounds like there's a choice that you're doing it in order to get the finances. But think of all the people who were abducted and became slaves without their choice, without financial remuneration, and without any freedom. And how this happened, the founding of this country, and how that was the basis of the economy of this country, and one of the reasons why the country was so successful, and why people are benefiting now from the labor done on the backs of slaves before. But slavery was not only in America. It was all over the world. And many of the Roma and Sinti people were often abducted into slaves in Europe. And everywhere you look, it's really kind of amazing how human beings can think of other human beings as property. But what he's saying here is, somebody may sell themselves into slavery for this to be able to support a family. But then, how can you get back to your family? How can you get out of being an indentured servant? And I think, if we look, what about credit card debt? Yeah. What happens? You're not selling your body, but you're financing everything by your credit card. And then who owns you? Yeah. Who are you indebted to? The credit card company. Yeah. You can't just say, well, sorry, I bought too much, but I've already used it and I can't return it, so the store is the loser. Yeah. And it's hard to declare bankruptcy, and if you do, it's a stain on your credit record. Yeah, but how many people get trapped in credit card debt? Yeah, a lot. And the interest for credit card debt is a lot, And so even, you're trying to pay it off, but you're mostly paying the cost of the interest, and it's very hard to even pay the principal off. Okay, but what breeds this? Attachment. We want different possessions. Yeah, we want this, we want that. Yeah, I was just reading that many people now are taking out loans to have a wedding. Because when you have a wedding, you want to have a big wedding and have, gazillions of people there and give them all souvenirs to take home with them with your names on them and beautiful wedding invitations. And, it is a business. Weddings are a huge business. And so here's a couple, they start out their life with debt. Because, a wedding nowadays can cost who knows how much. It's in the tens of thousands of dollars. And, yeah, how do you pay that back? Okay. So they are they are aimlessly driven by the winds of others' actions. So whoever you sold yourself to. I remember also reading a book. Some of you may remember the name. I read it a long time ago. It was about people in Bombay, some of the untouchables, I think it was, and to cover their expenses and support their family, they sold their organs. Yeah, anybody remember the name of that book? So they would, you're impoverished, you sell your liver, for example, or your kidneys or whatever. So they take you to a hospital. Yeah, you're trusting them. You may have sold your kidney, but they also take your liver or your pancreas or some other thing. Yeah. Sanitation is iffy. Yeah. They sew you back up. You go back to your family and you have to go back to work immediately, even though you've just had major surgery. And then there's the risk of infection because you're living in a slum where things, where you're poor to start out with and there's little sanitation. And this was happening in Bombay. Okay, so this is 76. Some sell their own bodies and without any power are employed by others. Okay, here at least they're employed. They're not selling. They're not going into major surgery where you have no control over what they're going to take out, because once they put you under, they can take out whatever they want. Yeah. and without any power are employed by others. Even when their wives give birth, their children fall at the feet of trees in lonely places. Yeah. So, so many people traveling in the army, they go back home. Yeah. And their wives have had kids and they weren't there, and maybe they're away for years at a time. And last time you saw your kid, they were 8 months old. And the next time you see them, they're 2 years old and they're wondering who you are. Maybe you did computer time with them, but they only know dad through the computer. They don't recognize, toddlers. Yeah, their dad walks in the door and they can't necessarily, they know the voice, but they can't associate the living person with the person on the other end of the Zoom call that they've been talking to as they've been growing up. Yeah. So quite difficult. 77. Some fools who are deceived by desire and wishing for a livelihood think, I shall earn my living as a soldier. Then, although afraid of losing their lives, they go to war. Others become slaves for the sake of profit. Okay, so, becoming a soldier is looked upon as, in this country, as a very honorable thing to do. Yeah, but the ads on TV that are meant to attract enlistments, they are not the reality of what being a soldier is. The ads are all about, you're there, in your dress uniform with the flag behind you, saluting, you look like a man who is a soldier who's fighting for their country, and that's seen as like the epitome of masculinity. Yeah. And is battle like that? What happens when you're in the middle of the battle? Yeah, you aren't wearing your dress uniform. It's dirty. You're scared. You know the word. You're scared out of your mind. You don't know when the battle's going to end. Bombs are falling around you. Yeah. Yeah. And you're terrified. And then, many people are killed, and then many people are injured, and you come back home and you're minus a leg. Yeah. Or maybe you're even quadriplegic. Yeah. They keep you alive, but what kind of life do you have after that? Yeah, it's very different than the image of, being the strong, brave man. Yeah, it's very different from the advertisement on TV. Yeah. But, it appeals, I think, to young men's thing of, wanting to be a man and prove themselves and be physically strong. And no, I'm not afraid of anybody. That's your outer shell. Inside, what's going on? Yeah. It's very good. Ken Burns did a whole series on Vietnam. And during the Vietnam War, they had reporters in the military who were going out to the battlefields and filming the actual battles. Yeah, it's very good to watch this, and see what's really going on. And just even what we saw in the last few days, World War II, bombs falling in a city. What we look at in the newspaper what's going on in Ukraine. I mean, it's amazing how people continue to live in the cities there when so much has been bombed and destroyed. And the war just keeps going on. And now, here's your latest news report. Because the war is going very poorly for Putin at this moment, and the Ukrainian troops have retaken a lot of area that the Russians were occupying. So Putin has just called up 300,000 more men to fight for Russia. And the response has been that all the tickets from all the airlines in all the cities are sold out because the men want to get out of the country. They don't want to go to war. And the mothers don't want their sons to go to war. Yeah. So now tickets to get out of the country are like $16,000. I mean, and that's to get to a country that doesn't require Russians to have visas. They just want to get out of the country. So there's a few countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, maybe a few like that where they can go. Yeah. And they're just trying to get out, and now all the tickets are gone. And a lot of the land routes by train had been closed very early on in the conflict. Yeah. So people are quite afraid. Yeah. So people are being given orders to report to the local enlistment services the next day. Yeah. So it's very difficult for many of them to get out of the country. They've got to report on versus penalty of getting arrested or who knows what. And there's some demonstrations now happening in some cities. Yeah. Which, of course, Putin doesn't like, but they're rounding up the people who are protesting. And we're seeing video clips of it. The police, carrying people by 2 arms and 2 legs or dragging people along the sidewalks to put them in the wagon because they've been protesting, And it's just protesting. I mean, they're not vandalizing anything. It's just you are not allowed to protest. Okay. So that's going on. Yeah, in several of the big cities through, especially, Leningrad and Moscow, or St. Petersburg and Moscow, but even Novosibirsk, it's in Siberia. Okay. Okay, so that was 77. 78. Some lustful people even cut their bodies. Others impale themselves on the points of sticks. Some stab themselves with daggers, and others burn themselves. Such things as these are quite apparent. Yeah, so he's talking about at least what happened in ancient India, of what people do to get the finances to start a family. Okay. So I don't know if they're doing these things for pay or to impress the family of whoever they're interested in. Yeah. Singaporeans. Yeah. Do you know, because I've seen in Singapore and especially in Malaysia, some of the people, not the Buddhists, mostly Hindus, dragging very heavy carts along, and the carts, the chains are hooked into the flesh in their back. And they are dragging those along. Is that done just for religion, or do they earn money or get social prestige or anything from that? Just religion. Okay. But it would boost their standing in the community. All of the guys do that?
I think my understanding is you have a choice, and then they do a lot of meditation before that to prepare. It's like a purification, and then sometimes they are in trance when they do that, so they don't really feel the pain. And the Chinese do them too.
Yeah.
Some of my uncles have done it, kind of. They're in the trance, and you just carry
and drag the...
Not the same as the Indians, but yes, they have swords.
And they would stick themselves with swords?
Kind of. But they're in trance, and there's a process that you get to.
Yeah.
So if you're not really into it, then you feel the pain.
Okay. Why did they do that? What's the purpose?
Some religious beliefs, they have some purification. There's some purification process, and they walk the fire too.
Yeah.
I saw that with my students. So there's a lot of pride. I don't know, like the family's like, oh, you're doing something. It's a rite of passage, and you're becoming a man. Among my students too, oh, it's so-and-so's big day. He's going to go see the medium and get possessed or get stuck with, I don't know what, but your friends support this too. It's like it gives you a sense of power. You can channel spirits or something.
There's no blood.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's amazing when you see them driving, walking down the streets of a modern city with these big hooks, into their back, pulling these very heavy things. Yeah.
Every year it happens.
Yeah. 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 I think even more so in Malaysia. At least I saw them more in Malaysia. Maybe Singapore competes and has more. Yeah.
On Easter, there are processions in Mexico from the Catholics, and while they walk, they are
flagellating, self-flagellating.
Yes, and they consider that a purification practice.
Yeah.
And also there are some people who have beliefs in the tribes, like who comes from the tribes, who have been in tribes before, and they hook themselves here, and they hang until the flesh is pulled.
So they put hooks.
They put like a hook here. You put a hook. Like if you're fishing, you put a hook here on your chest. And then you are hanged until it's pulled.
Until your flesh breaks.
Yeah.
And you fall.
Yeah. You don't fall. It's like Venerable explained, they are kind of in trance before.
Yeah.
But it's a way that they show like courage and things to... you see a lot of blood there. It's very impressive.
Yeah.
Very, very impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I should probably tell you this, because after last week's teachings, when we were talking a little bit about, how men are acculturated and how women are acculturated, somebody wrote and said that that the presentation I gave was kind of outdated. Yeah. And that nowadays, the big thing for the young men is porn. And, that's what they're really involved in and addicted to. And one of the reasons why they feel lonely and why they don't know how to relate to living women. And it was also saying, one guy, because he sent a few links to things on the web of discussion about this. And one of the guys was saying, what was it? Yes, that there's a crisis of young men now because, and what he said as an example is that all the mass shooters are young men, and you see that. It's, you don't find the women doing it or the older men, it's the young men. And, how lost they are. They didn't talk a lot about remedies, but it's something that needs to be dealt with. Yeah. So it was interesting. I had, yeah. Okay. But, these are all crises within our society. And what's fueling it is, the wish for pleasure and the wish for prestige. And everybody's being affected by it. I mean, clearly with mass shooting, it's, it may be the young men who perpetrate, but it's affecting everybody in the whole country. Okay. And so in this verse, in 78, when they're talking not only about others, people impaling themselves and all, but they're talking about what people do to get wealth to support a family and how they then get in trouble with the law. And so in ancient India, and in countries today too, if you steal to get wealth, they often punish you by cutting off your hand. Or I guess some of the kings in past eras did something with pointed spears, sticking them in people, or they had to come out of certain orifices. I don't know about these things. Yeah, but these are the kinds of things that are mentioned here. Others burn themselves. This is one way if you're in a gang. Why do you join a gang? It gives you security. You have access to a group of friends. You're socially accepted. Yeah, your honor is very important when you're in a gang, and you reap some wealth from it. And so sometimes burning or tattoos to show your membership in a gang. I don't imagine the burning is much fun. But all sorts of things that people do to show that they're a member of a certain gang, and therefore they have prestige or they get this or that. Yeah. So it's interesting how he's talking here, and he's not just talking about like the Brahmins, the upper class, and what they do, but how how lust affects all the different classes of people, and has a very, very wide reach in terms of what people have to do to fulfill their desire. 79, due to the torment involved in collecting it, protecting, and finally losing it, I should realize wealth to be fraught with infinite problems. Those who are distracted by their attachment to it have no opportunity to gain freedom from the misery of conditioned existence. Okay, this is a good summary verse. He continues going on, so it's not ending the section yet here. But this verse is really, putting it all together. And so he's specifically talking about wealth, but, wealth, material possessions. Then from wealth, how wealth links to family, to sexual desire, to self-image, to a feeling of self-worth, to your status in the family, to, getting ahead and having a good reputation in society, through to feeling protected in your old age, that you have money to rely on. Okay, so how attachment to wealth actually it clearly links to so many other attachments and so many other needs in society. So in all these things, they're all kind of, if you're linked together, if you're attached to your reputation, that links to all these other attachments. And, the whole kit and caboodle is just one sticky mess. Yeah. So clearly he's talking to monastics here. He's, in terms of what he's saying to lay people is, yes, you're going to be involved in all of this, but be moderate, and don't get into it above your head. And above all, don't create, any of the 10 destructive actions to get the wealth. Yeah, if you need wealth to survive in the world these days, you can't, but procure your wealth in an honest way, without lying or cheating or, the various forms of stealing and so on. So it's quite interesting now. Another example from the news. As you know, that's why I read the news. It's all about samsara. It's great lamrim. Yeah. So dear Donnie he's in big trouble now. As we all know, part of Donnie's glamour and why he attracted so many voters to start with was his image as somebody who got a lot of wealth very quickly and is extravagantly wealthy, but understands the plight of working class Americans and wants to help them. Okay, this was his image, and this is, how many of his followers see him. But now what is happening? When he was president, he kept on saying executive privilege, and many people agreed that you don't want to throw a big lawsuit on the president because it's going to distract him from governing the country and so on. But now that he's no longer president, yesterday, Letitia James from who's the Attorney General in New York, I think that's her position. Anyway, she for years in her department has been investigating his finances. And they just yesterday sent to the court a 200-page indictment with all the facts of how he has lied about his wealth and how he has lied, saying that different pieces of property were smaller and therefore were worth less so that he didn't have to pay as much taxes on them. Because we all know that he paid, $750 taxes for a couple of years? And so there's that. And then in other cases, in order to get loans, he inflated the square feet of different properties and their values in order, to use that as collateral to get loans to buy more stuff. So all of this conniving that he's been doing, and it's not just him. The indictment is also for Donnie Jr., Ivanka, and Eric. So all four of them, as and Donnie had signed all these different things that were sent to banks and so on. So, what we're seeing is, he got away with all of this stuff for many years, lying and cheating, stealing. He is known in New York City for not paying the people who work for him. Yeah. And I heard that repeatedly when I was in New York. And the article in the paper was saying that he is not well liked in New York. This is his reputation. So what we're seeing is, he got away with it for a long time, but now the results are coming, and he cannot claim, well, I'm the president, so I should be immune from this. Yeah. Of course, he's saying his usual thing whenever something happens, which is, it's a witch hunt. They're trying to destroy me. I haven't done anything wrong. It's the Dems. It's the liberal elite, and they're all out to get me. And I'm just an honest person who's working for the country. That's what he always says. So he's saying that. But it's interesting, a real life story. When you create negativity to get possessions and social status, eventually something's going to happen. Yeah. And here it says, it may come a little bit later. Oh, no. Due to the torment involved in collecting it, protecting it, the wealth, and finally losing it. So you lose it in terms of the law coming after you. And if that doesn't happen, you eventually lose it when you die. You cannot take it with. And it doesn't matter whether you die rich or poor or have a luxurious funeral or not. The result is that you are dead, and your karma is propelling you towards another rebirth, as a reflection of the kind of actions that you did. And at that point, when you're when you're dying and the karma is ripening, I don't care how many lawyers you have, they're not going to do any good. Yeah. And all your newspaper clippings praising you and how much power, they don't do any good. And, none of that does any good. You are separated from what you spent your whole life trying to get, and you did that by harming a number of other living beings. So it's a good example for us. Well, no, it's a bad example for us. We don't want to follow that example. But it's a good example in the sense that it really shows us how easy it is to get caught up in that attachment to wealth and social status, and what the results are at the end of the day for that. And one thing in Dharma practice is it really encourages us to think ahead, not just to think of what is going to happen today and, what good or bad things can happen today, but what are the results of our actions later on in this life, and what are the results of our actions in future lives? And to think about that, and then to ask ourselves, is what I'm doing now worth having that kind of result? Yeah. And people who can think long term and abstain from grasping at pleasure now wind up having better situations in the future than people who don't think about the results of their actions and just, want the pleasure right now, the immediate pleasure. So we see this, so much in Dharma practice that to create virtue, we have to give up this addiction to immediate pleasurable results. It doesn't mean torment ourselves. The Buddha was very clearly against, torment and extreme asceticism and so on. Yeah. So this again comes back to understanding the teachings and understanding cause and effect. And through that understanding, revising how we make decisions about what to do and what not to do, and what is important in our lives and what is not important. Okay, so those who are distracted by their attachment to wealth. No, I'm sorry, I should read the whole thing. Okay, so we did this first line. I should realize wealth to be fraught with infinite problems. Yeah. Usually, we don't think of wealth as fraught with infinite problems, but it is. As soon as you have a car, you are in car hell in this life, because as soon as you have a car, it's going to break, or it's going to get dented or rammed into, or who knows what. And you're going to have to figure out how to hand that up. When you have a computer or a smartphone, immediately you're in computer hell or smartphone hell. Okay. Yeah. Anybody else besides me ever been in computer hell? You're trying to get something done and the computer is just like, it has its own mind and it's doing its own trip. And, you Google about what to do for this problem. You try it and it just makes the problem worse. Yeah. And then finally you call Venerable Jigme and Venerable Rinchen and scream, help, and then they look at you with, okay, I'll give it a try. And they try and they often fix it, and they often spend days and hours, going through the whole thing. As soon as you have a website, you have website hell. We should all feel very sorry for poor Venerable Damcha, who for months now is struggling to get the website out of website hell. Okay, so as soon as you have anything, because its nature is transient, you're going to have problems with it. Okay, we have the Abbey, So, we need to put in a French drain in the garden. It sounds easy. You just dig a trench and put this pipe in, and then the whole problem's solved. Well, in digging the trench, they found, 5 electric wires all going in different directions, various water pipes going, they don't know where, and bits of concrete here and there. Okay, I walked by this morning to check how they were doing. And Doug, who is, he's the champion who uses the machines like he's using his hand. He's so skillful with it. And there's some guy down in the ditch. You can just see the top of his head. And, and they're talking and trying to figure out this problem. And I said to Doug, how's it going? And he said, it's going. And I said, I hear it's challenging. And he said, yes, it's challenging. Yeah. And so, they're being incredibly creative. But what we thought was going to be a one-day job is turning into, multiple days, and the end of the job is not seen yet. Okay. So, the point is, as soon as you have something and you have to take care of it, I should realize wealth to be fraught with infinite problems. Yeah. Those who are distracted by their attachment to it have no opportunity to gain freedom from the misery of conditioned existence. Yeah, so those who are distracted by their attachment to wealth and all of the other things that it's linked to, the prospect of liberation and awakening is distant. Okay, we have time for maybe one or two questions. So he's speaking out here against attachment. Yeah, attachment is the problem, not the wealth. Okay, the wealth is the object. We generate this clinging, longing, whatever to it.
It's just a comment. It says there is one book called Commodifying Bodies.
Oh, commodifying bodies. That's not the title I was thinking of, but it sounds like it's talking about, selling your body for something.
My cousin's husband works for his brother's father-in-law because they're multi-millionaires. And what he does once a month, or maybe I think it's twice a month, they get him on a private jet and he flies out to an island on the West Coast and he checks their property because they have multiple cars, like many, and multiple boats, and it's just stuff that they're terrified that someone will steal. So his job is just to go out and make sure everything is secure. And he's flown out and back on a private jet for this family that has so much stuff.
Wow.
And they have 5 other homes. So he's just checking one location. But the stress, and the money they pay him and the fuel that's burned in transporting him alone on the private jet to check their cars and boats and whatever else.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Is it true that all the mass shooters have been white also? Young white males. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Mm-hmm. That's significant. It's not...
Oh, the mass shooters.
Right. Every single one.
Yeah. It's mostly young white males.
I was thinking of the examples, that you gave in terms of kind of the harm to the body for these rites of passages. And it seemed like, so many of them are, for me, it's like, okay, I don't necessarily relate to this, but I've seen this in college in, say, fraternities, and I'll say that, the Greek organizations on the whole try really hard to not have hazing happen, but it still does. And so, it's not just, people in gangs or people in other countries burning themselves or cutting themselves, but, upper class, mainstream Americans.
Yeah, very much so. If I could just change what you said, actually, they want to have hazing. They just don't want to get caught. And they don't want anything negative to happen. But that's another thing that's in the news these days is the one kid, of course, at a hazing thing. He was a freshman. They got him a bottle of Jack Daniels and told him to drink the whole bottle. And the next morning he was dead. And his parents, they brought a lawsuit against the university. And several of the frat boys were arrested. But what the parents want, they don't want the frat boys to be put in prison, but they want them to go around and give talks at universities and high schools about this kind of behavior. And they go around with the kid's father. And they give the talk together with the father of their friend whose death they are responsible for. And I thought that father, he knew what he was doing, to drive that home to these kids, that it's not just, let's be frat boys and have a good time. It's And there's more and more cases now of fraternity things happening, and it's in the news, and the kids are getting arrested. The national fraternity organizations are getting fined. The universities are getting in trouble. So there's more cases now about that. Anything else? Okay, let's dedicate.